Beneath the burning sun and endless dunes of North Africa stands a civilization that has haunted the human imagination for more than 4,000 years. Egypt, with its towering pyramids, silent temples, and intricate hieroglyphs, feels at once familiar and unreachable. We recognize its symbols instantly: the all-seeing eye, the golden mask, the winged sun disk. Yet when we try to explain them fully, the meaning slips away like sand through our hands. Why does Egypt, more than any other ancient culture, carry this aura of mystery? Why do its monuments stand as riddles to science, defying the passing of time and the certainty of history? According to textbooks, Egypt was the land of pharaohs, a powerful kingdom along the Nile, guided by rituals and gods. Yet when we look closer, there are gaps in the story. Gaps so wide that even today scholars admit there is more we don't know than we do. Some of the world's greatest puzzles rise from these sands. The Great Pyramid, aligned with the stars with mathematical precision modern architects still struggle to explain. The Sphinx, eroded in ways that suggest it might be older than Egypt itself. Temples where stones weighing hundreds of tons were cut, moved, and placed with such accuracy that even with today's machines, the feat seems unthinkable. Legends whisper of forbidden knowledge, ancient sciences, rituals, and perhaps even wisdom deliberately hidden away. Some tales suggest the priests of Heliopolis preserved secrets of the cosmos. Others claim the Library of Alexandria once held scrolls describing technologies beyond its time. And there are myths that Egypt's gods themselves left instructions carved in symbols only the worthy could unlock. For the Egyptians, myth and reality were never separate. Every sunrise was not just the movement of a planet, but the daily victory of Ra, the sun god, against the serpent of chaos. Every flood of the Nile was not merely water, but the breath of Osiris, bringing fertility to the land. These were not metaphors to them, they were truths lived and felt. And within those truths lies the heart of the forbidden history, a worldview where science, religion, and myth fused into one. But what is forbidden history? The phrase does not mean dark conspiracies or secret cults alone. It means the parts of Egypt's past that lie outside the safe explanations of modern science. It refers to questions scholars cannot yet solve, and sometimes avoid, because the answers challenge what we believe about the origins of civilization. Consider this. Egypt seemed to emerge suddenly, fully formed. Around 3000 BCE, great cities appeared, along with a writing system, organized religion, complex architecture, and advanced medicine. In other regions, cultures grew slowly over centuries. In Egypt, it was as if someone had pressed a switch and civilization lit up almost overnight. Was it simply genius, chance, or something else entirely? The ancient Egyptians themselves had their own explanation. They said their wisdom was inherited from the gods, from Thoth, lord of writing and knowledge, from Isis, mistress of magic, and from Osiris, who taught humanity agriculture and law. To modern ears, these sound like myths. Yet for the Egyptians, they were the truth of how human society began. Archaeologists tell us fragments of the story. They find tools, bones, inscriptions, and broken pottery. But the monuments that dominate the desert seem to speak of something larger, something we still struggle to interpret. How did they master astronomy to align temples with solstices? How did they achieve such surgical knowledge that even Greek physicians later studied Egyptian methods? How did they move stones so vast that our cranes today would strain to lift them? These questions form the threshold of our journey. As we walk deeper into Egypt's forbidden history, we will step beyond the well-known tales of Cleopatra and Tutankhamun. Instead, we'll trace the hidden currents, myths older than the pyramids, gods who ruled before men, and symbols carved into stone that refused to give up their meaning. According to legend, Egypt's knowledge was never lost. It was veiled, encoded in temples, and carried through generations of priests and scribes. Some even believe echoes of that wisdom shaped later religions, philosophies, and secret societies. Whether true or not, the idea itself has endured, that Egypt still holds keys to mysteries humanity is not yet ready to understand. So tonight, as we stand before the Nile, imagine the sound of water flowing under the moonlight. The desert wind whispers across broken statues and sand-buried ruins. Behind those stones lies a story too vast for one lifetime, a story humanity has been trying to retell for millennia. The forbidden history of Egypt awaits us, not to frighten, but to remind us of how much wonder still lies unexplained. To understand Egypt's forbidden history, we must first enter its world, the land where myth and earth blended into one. Geography shaped everything. The Nile, that vast river cutting through desert, was more than water. It was the spine of the kingdom, the giver of life. Without it, there would have been no fields of grain, no thriving villages, no cities rising into stone marvels. To the Egyptians, the Nile was not simply a river but a god, Hapi, whose yearly flood meant both survival and renewal. Beyond the fertile valley stretched endless sands. The desert acted as both prison and protector. It isolated Egypt from invaders for centuries, but it also guarded its secrets, preserving mummies, temples, and entire cities in the dry heat. Mountains of limestone and granite provided the raw material for pyramids and obelisks, and caves concealed inscriptions that would one day puzzle archaeologists. Time in Egypt moved differently than in other lands. Historians divide its history into Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, with chaotic periods of collapse in between. Yet to the Egyptians themselves, time was not linear but cyclical, like the rising and setting of the sun, or the flood of the Nile. Every pharaoh, no matter the century, was seen as a link in a chain that stretched back to the first god-kings. Who were these god-kings? The myths tell us of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set, deities who ruled before mortal pharaohs ever wore the crown. According to one tradition preserved by the priest Manetho, long before human kings, there was a line of divine rulers, beings who taught humanity laws, crafts, and rituals. Some say they reigned for thousands of years, their names carved into king lists that modern scholars find baffling. Were these symbolic tales, or memories of forgotten ages? As Egyptian civilization blossomed, pharaohs became the living link between gods and mortals. They were not simply kings. They were Horus in flesh, sons of Ra, and after death they became Osiris, lord of the underworld. Their monuments were not just tombs, but gateways between worlds. Each temple was designed as a miniature cosmos, reflecting the order of the universe itself. In the Old Kingdom, the age of the Great Pyramids, the focus was on building eternal monuments. The pyramid texts carved into the walls of tombs are among the oldest religious writings on earth. They describe the pharaoh's journey after death, ascending to the stars, joining Ra in his solar bark, and overcoming trials with spells and incantations. Here we glimpse the union of science and magic, geometry and astronomy serving religion, ritual fused with engineering. Later, in the Middle Kingdom, myths deepened and spread beyond pharaohs. Ordinary Egyptians sought protection from household gods, amulets shaped like scarabs, and spells inscribed on papyrus. Stories of Osiris became more universal, no longer the journey of kings alone, but of all souls. Death was not the end but a passage, judged by Ma'at, the goddess of truth, who weighed each heart against a feather. The New Kingdom expanded Egypt's reach. Temples like Karnak and Luxor rose, filled with colossal statues and reliefs. Here, myths were performed in grand festivals, the Opet festival at Thebes, where statues of gods were carried along the Nile. The Book of the Dead spread widely, a collection of spells to guide the dead through the afterlife. And myths evolved. Ra was fused with Ammonius into Ammonius Ra, the supreme creator, reflecting Egypt's growing empire. Throughout these ages, one theme remained constant, the sense that Egypt's wisdom was older than memory itself. Priests guarded knowledge in sanctuaries hidden from common eyes. Hieroglyphs themselves were called Mita-Netjer, the words of the gods. Writing was not invention but revelation, said to be a gift of Thoth, the ibis-headed lord of wisdom. Even today, scholars debate whether some of Egypt's knowledge came from an even earlier culture. Could there have been a forgotten civilization before the dynasties, one that laid foundations for their sudden rise? The erosion patterns on the Sphinx, the astronomical alignments of temples, and the inexplicable precision of their measurements all fuel this question. So the stage is set. A fertile river, protective deserts, divine rulers, and a people who saw no line between heaven and earth. Out of this unique world emerged myths that endure like the monuments themselves, stories of gods who shaped the sun, the stars, and the fate of every soul. These are not just tales of the past. They are echoes of a worldview so different from ours that even now, we struggle to grasp it fully. When we speak of myths, we often think of polished stories written in books. But Egypt's earliest myths were not written down. They were whispered in temples, sung by priests, and woven into rituals that stretched back into prehistory. For centuries before hieroglyphs appeared, the Egyptians carried their sacred knowledge through voice, gesture, and ceremony. The first written versions of these myths emerge in what we call the pyramid texts, inscriptions carved into the tombs of Old Kingdom pharaohs more than 4,000 years ago. These are not narratives in a modern sense, but collections of spells, hymns, and invocations. They were meant to guide the pharaoh after death, ensuring his safe journey among the stars. In these fragments, we see glimpses of older oral traditions, now crystallized into sacred words. One striking feature of Egyptian myth is its diversity. Unlike later religions that sought one consistent canon, Egypt allowed multiple, sometimes contradictory, versions of a story to exist side by side. In one city, the world might begin with a cosmic egg laid by a primeval goose. In another, creation might spring from a mound rising out of chaos, or from the tears of the sun god Ra. Each version was true in its own place, tied to the gods and temples of that region. The earliest centers of myth were Heliopolis, Hermopolis, and Memphis. Heliopolis told of Adam, the self-created god, who emerged from the waters of chaos and brought forth the first divine pair, Shu and Tefnut. From them came Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, whose children included Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, the gods who shaped human destiny. Hermopolis, by contrast, spoke of the Ogdoad, 8 primeval deities, male and female pairs, representing darkness, infinity, hiddenness, and water. Together, they stirred the chaos from which creation was born. This version emphasized duality and balance, echoing the Egyptians' obsession with harmony in all things. Memphis preserved yet another tradition, centering on Thoth, the craftsman god. According to this myth, Thoth created the world not with hands or blood, but with thought and speech. He conceived creation in his heart and brought it into being with his tongue. This idea, that words themselves had creative power, is one of Egypt's most profound legacies. Even today, echoes of it can be found in religious texts that speak of the word as the origin of life. What makes these origins so fascinating is not only their variety, but also their hidden layers. For the Egyptians, myths were never simple stories. They were codes, multi-layered truths, understood differently by priests, by common people, and by kings. A tale that seemed like a simple fable about Ra sailing the sky might also conceal astronomical knowledge, moral law, or rituals of magic. The oral tradition preserved secrets not meant for everyone. Priests guarded the most powerful hymns and spells, passing them only to initiates. Some texts were written in cryptographic hieroglyphs, meant to obscure meaning from the untrained eye. Even within Egypt, knowledge was graded, the outer story for the masses, the inner truth for the chosen. There are traces that some of these myths may have drawn on even older memories. The tale of a great flood, for instance, appears in Egyptian tradition long before it surfaces in other cultures. The conflict between order and chaos, embodied in Ra's eternal battle against the serpent Apophis, mirrors cosmic struggles found in Mesopotamia and later in Persia. Did Egypt inherit these from neighbors, or did they share a common root stretching back into the shadows of prehistory? Scholars today continue to debate. Some see these myths as allegories, born naturally from observation of the Nile, the sun, and the stars. Others suspect that Egypt preserved fragments of a much older worldview, perhaps from a forgotten civilization lost to time. The very contradictions in the stories, creation from an egg, from a mound, from a god's tears, from the words of Thoth, may point to multiple traditions merging, each preserving echoes of a deeper past. According to ancient priests, myths were not just history, they were living truths. Each festival, each ritual, reenacted creation itself. By retelling the story, by repeating the sacred words, Egyptians believed they were helping to keep the universe in balance. Without myth, the sun might not rise, the Nile might not flood, and the world could slip back into chaos. Thus, the origins of Egyptian myth are not found in one book or one city, but in the endless weaving together of stories, songs, and symbols across centuries. They are fragments of a puzzle, some preserved, some lost, some deliberately hidden, that together form the forbidden history we still struggle to understand. No ancient civilization produced such a vivid gallery of divine figures as Egypt. Their gods were not distant abstractions, but living presences, often half human, half animal, representing forces of nature and principles of order. Each one was a symbol, yet also a personality with desires, rivalries, and powers that shaped the world. To understand Egypt's forbidden history, we must walk among these gods and see how they reflected both the cosmos and the human heart. At the center stood Ra, the sun god, traveling across the sky each day in his solar bark, bringing light and life. Every night he descended into the underworld, battling the great serpent Apophis, embodiment of chaos. If Ra ever failed, the sun would not rise. His daily journey symbolized not only the cycle of day and night, but the eternal struggle between order and disorder. In some myths, Ra merged with Ammonius, the hidden god, to become Ammonius Ra, a supreme creator whose breath sustained the universe. Beside him was Osiris, the green-skinned lord of fertility and the afterlife. Osiris represented renewal, vegetation, and eternal life. His story is one of Egypt's most famous. Slain by his jealous brother Set, restored by his sister wife Isis, and resurrected as ruler of the underworld. To Egyptians, Osiris was not just a god but a promise, that death was not an end but a passage to another life. Isis, Osiris's wife, became one of the most beloved figures in Egyptian religion. She was mother, protector, healer, and magician. Legends tell how she gathered the scattered pieces of Osiris's body, reassembled him, and conceived their son, Horus. Isis was also known for her cunning, outwitting even Ra himself to learn his secret name, gaining power over him. Her worship spread far beyond Egypt, later influencing goddesses in Greece and Rome. Their son, Horus, was the falcon-headed god of kingship and the sky. In myths, Horus fought Set to avenge his father's death, a battle that raged across heaven and earth. Sometimes Horus is shown as a child, Harpocrates, symbolizing the new sun rising each day. Other times he is the mighty falcon, protector of pharaohs, whose eyes represented the sun and the moon. In opposition stood Set, god of storms, desert, and violence. He embodied chaos, but not always as an enemy. At times Set defended Ra's boat against Apophis, proving that even chaos could serve order. His animal form, a strange composite creature with square ears and a forked tail, remains one of Egypt's enduring mysteries. Another key figure was Thoth, ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and time. Thoth was said to have invented hieroglyphs, kept the calendar, and measured the heavens. He mediated between gods and disputes, weighed truth in the judgment of souls, and recorded every outcome. In many ways, Thoth was the embodiment of Egypt's intellectual spirit, the belief that words and numbers were not just tools, but divine forces. Beside him stood Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. With a feather upon her head, she symbolized the principle that kept the universe from collapsing into chaos. Every pharaoh swore to uphold Ma'at, and every soul was weighed against her feather in the afterlife. Ma'at was not merely an idea, but the very law of existence, uniting religion, morality, and nature. There were others too. Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of the dead, who embalmed Osiris and guarded tombs. Hathor, goddess of love, music, and joy, often shown as a cow or a woman with cow's ears, who welcomed the dead into the afterlife with her embrace. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and plague, whose breath was said to create the desert wind. Batet, her gentler counterpart, goddess of home, cats, and protection. What makes this pantheon remarkable is not only its richness, but also its adaptability. Gods could merge, change forms, or absorb each other's traits. Ra became Ammonius Ra. Horus fused with Ra as Arahorikti. Osiris could appear as a full god or as the silent body within the tomb. To Egyptians, this fluidity was natural. The divine could not be bound to one form. Comparisons with other cultures show Egypt's unique vision. Like the Greek Zeus, Ra was supreme. Yet unlike Zeus, he faced a daily cosmic enemy. Like Mesopotamia's Enki, Thoth was wise, but he embodied time and law in a way no Mesopotamian god did. Isis, with her role as mother and magician, prefigured figures such as Demeter and even the Virgin Mary. Egypt's gods were both local and universal, deeply tied to their land, yet carrying archetypes that would echo across civilizations. Through these gods, Egyptians explained the mysteries of life and death, order and chaos, time and eternity. But more than that, they encoded wisdom, astronomy, agriculture, ethics, medicine, into stories that could be remembered and lived by all. Every temple carving, every ritual festival, was both worship and teaching. And within these teachings lies the sense of forbidden history, that the gods may have been more than symbols, that they guarded knowledge too profound for casual eyes. Among the countless Egyptian myths, none captured the imagination of the people more than the story of Osiris. It was not only a legend of gods, but a drama of life, death, betrayal, and renewal, one that shaped Egyptian religion for millennia and echoed across the ancient world. The story begins with a kingdom in harmony. Osiris, the green-skinned lord of fertility, ruled Egypt with justice and wisdom. Under his reign, the land flourished. He taught people how to farm, how to use irrigation, how to make laws and live in peace. Fields were rich, the Nile was bountiful, and people thrived. Isis, his queen, stood beside him, beloved, powerful, a mother figure for all. Together they embodied the perfect order of Maya. But harmony never lasts unchallenged. Osiris's brother, Set, watched with growing envy and resentment. While Osiris represented fertility and renewal, Set ruled over storms, deserts, and chaos. In a land dependent on the Nile, the desert was always a threat. To some, Set was necessary, a reminder that life is fragile. Yet his hunger for power could not be contained. According to the tale, Set devised a plan both cunning and cruel. He crafted a beautiful chest, made to the exact measurements of Osiris's body, and presented it at a grand feast. With charm and false generosity, Set invited guests to try it. Whoever fit the chest perfectly, he declared, would keep it as a gift. One by one, the gods tried. The chest was too long, too short, too narrow, until Osiris stepped inside. It was made for him alone. At that moment, Set slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and hurled it into the Nile. The river carried Osiris away, and with him, the order of the kingdom dissolved into grief. The chest drifted down the Nile, eventually reaching the sea and the distant land of Byblos. There it lodged in the roots of a tamarisk tree, which grew around it, concealing the coffin in its trunk. The king of Byblos, unaware of its secret, cut down the tree and used it as a pillar in his palace. Isis, consumed with sorrow, searched endlessly for her husband. Her journey became one of the most poignant parts of the myth. Disguised as a common woman, she wandered foreign lands, healed strangers with her magic, and asked questions in whispers until she discovered the palace where the tree pillar stood. By her cunning and divine power, she retrieved the chest and brought it back to Egypt. But Set was relentless. Discovering Osiris's body, he unleashed his fury. In a rage, he tore the corpse into 14 pieces and scattered them across the land, determined that his brother would never return. Each fragment fell in a different place, some in the fertile delta, some in the desert sands, some lost in the river. Isis, undaunted, began her second quest. With the help of her sister Nephthys, the jackal-headed Anubis, and the wisdom of Thoth, she searched for each piece of Osiris. In every town where she found one, a shrine was built, giving rise to Egypt's sacred geography. Each site claimed to guard part of the god, creating a network of holy places that united the land. When at last she reassembled her husband, Isis used her magic to breathe life back into him. For a brief moment, Osiris returned. In that sacred union, she conceived their son, Horus, destined to avenge his father. But Osiris could not remain among the living. Instead, he descended into the underworld, where he became ruler of the dead, judge of souls, and eternal symbol of renewal. This story unfolds like a cosmic play: betrayal, murder, love, resurrection, and justice. For the Egyptians, it was more than entertainment. It explained why the Nile flooded each year. The death and rebirth of Osiris mirrored in the land itself. It offered hope that death was not the end, that life could be restored in another form, and it taught that order must constantly be defended against chaos. The myth of Osiris became the foundation of Egyptian religion. Every funeral echoed it. Every pharaoh was identified with Osiris in death, and with Horus in life. Even ordinary Egyptians found comfort in the story, believing that if Osiris could rise again, so too could they. In many ways, this tale is Egypt's forbidden history in miniature. It is both myth and code, a story about gods that is also about agriculture, astronomy, morality, and the eternal human struggle against decay. It is a reminder that behind every carving and temple lies not just stone, but a narrative that refuses to die. The story of Osiris may be the heart of Egyptian myth, but it was never told in only one way. Egypt was a land of many cities and cult centers, each with its own priesthood and traditions. These regional variations did not compete so much as coexist, creating a tapestry of myths that were both shared and distinct. The same story could shift in emphasis, detail, and meaning depending on where you heard it. In some traditions, Osiris's body was divided not into 14 pieces, but into 16 or even 42, a symbolic number tied to the 42 nomes, or provinces, of Egypt. Each nome claimed to guard a sacred relic of Osiris, making the god's body literally scattered across the entire kingdom. This created a network of pilgrimage sites, where worshippers could honor Osiris and tie their local identity to the national myth. Other versions shifted focus from Osiris to Horus. In the Delta, where Horus's cult was strong, the story emphasized the child's miraculous survival after Set's attack. Isis hid Horus in the marshes of the Nile, protecting him from scorpions and Set's assassins. These tales often showed Isis as the ultimate mother, using spells to cure her son of snake bites and illness. Farmers in the Delta turned these myths into healing charms, reciting them over sick children. In Upper Egypt, the rivalry between Horus and Set took center stage. Their battles were told not just as symbolic, but as literal contests that shaped the geography of the land. One myth describes a race in boats made of stone, with Set trying to trick Horus by using a wooden boat painted to look like stone. In another, their fight turns into a legal trial before the gods, lasting 80 years. Each god argued his right to the throne of Egypt, until finally the council declared Horus the victor. There were also myths that cast Set in a different light. In some temples, he was not a villain but a necessary protector. On Ra's nightly voyage through the underworld, it was often Set who stood at the prow of the sun bark, spearing the serpent Apophis to defend creation itself. These versions suggest that even chaos had its role, that disorder was not only destructive, but sometimes essential to balance. Another fascinating variation concerns the creation myths. In Heliopolis, the world began with Adam rising from the waters of chaos, giving birth to the first gods. But in Hermopolis, 8 primeval deities known as the Ogdoad stirred the waters of creation. And in Memphis, Thoth created the world through thought and speech. To modern minds, these contradictions seem confusing, but for Egyptians they revealed a deeper truth. The universe was too vast for one single story. Multiple perspectives were not errors, but layers of understanding. Even the gods themselves could merge and change. Ammonius of Thebes, once a local wind god, merged with Ra to become Ammonius Ra, king of the gods. Horus could appear as Horus the child, Horus the falcon, or Horus the elder, distinct forms with overlapping roles. Isis absorbed traits from Hathor, while Sekhmet and Batet represented 2 faces of the same lioness power, destruction and nurture. This fluidity allowed Egypt's myths to adapt over time, reflecting political shifts and cultural needs. Regional myths also offer different lessons. In some places, the death of Osiris symbolized the flooding of the Nile, bringing renewal to the soil. Elsewhere, his resurrection symbolized the rebirth of the moon after its disappearance. In certain local cults, Horus was not Osiris's son but his brother, reshaping the entire family dynamic. Each version had its own symbolic richness, tied to the rhythms of the local landscape. For outsiders, these contradictions made Egyptian religion difficult to grasp. Greek historians often complained that Egyptians told multiple stories for the same god. But for Egyptians themselves, this was not a flaw but a strength. Truth, they believed, was not singular. Like the Nile branching into many channels, myth could take different paths, yet still flow from the same source. This openness may be part of what gave Egyptian mythology its enduring power. Instead of a rigid doctrine, it offered a living system, flexible enough to survive centuries of change. It absorbed new influences, adapted to new rulers, and yet remained uniquely Egyptian. In this lies another layer of its forbidden history, a worldview where contradictions were not erased but embraced, hinting at a complexity that even modern thought struggles to match. To walk through Egypt's temples is to enter a world of symbols. Every wall, every statue, every amulet carried layers of meaning, some visible, some concealed. For the Egyptians, symbols were not decoration. They were living forces, a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. Decoding them offers a glimpse into how they understood life, death, and the cosmos. Animals played a central role. The falcon symbolized the sky and kingship, embodied in Horus. The jackal, associated with Anubis, represented guardianship of the dead and the power of transition between life and afterlife. Cats, linked with Batet, were protectors of the home, their agility and mystery seen as divine qualities. Lions represented both destruction and protection, as with Sekhmet. Even creatures of fear, like crocodiles and scorpions, became sacred, embodying dangerous powers that could be controlled through worship. Numbers, too, carried weight. The number 2 symbolized duality, male and female, order and chaos, sky and earth. 3 represented completeness, often shown in triads of gods such as Osiris, Isis, and Horus. 4 evoked stability, like the 4 cardinal directions or the 4 sons of Horus who guarded the organs of the dead. 7 carried magical connotations, appearing in spells and protective charms. These numbers were not abstractions, but living patterns woven into temples, pyramids, and rituals. Sacred objects also filled Egyptian life with meaning. The ankh, shaped like a cross with a loop, symbolized life itself, eternal and unbroken. Pharaohs held it in depictions, offering life to their people. The scepter represented power and dominion, often carried by gods and kings alike. The Djed pillar symbolized stability and endurance, linked to Osiris's backbone, a sign of resurrection and strength. The scarab beetle, rolling its ball of dung across the sand, became a symbol of the sun's journey and the soul's rebirth. Colors held symbolic force as well. White meant purity and sacredness, worn by priests in rituals. Black, far from negative, symbolized fertility, as it mirrored the rich soil of the Nile. Green represented life and regeneration, as seen in depictions of Osiris. Gold embodied eternity and the divine, reflecting the unchanging brilliance of the sun. Blue symbolized the sky, water, and protection, while red signified both danger and vitality. In Egypt, to wear or paint with a color was to summon its energy. Hieroglyphs themselves were more than writing. Each sign was a symbol with inherent power. To carve a name was to give it permanence. To erase a name was to destroy its existence. That is why pharaohs sometimes chiseled out the names of rivals, not just to erase memory, but to strike them from eternity. The written word was sacred, believed to be a direct gift from Thoth, and even short inscriptions could carry protective or magical force. Architecture also spoke in symbols. The pyramid, with its triangular shape rising to a point, symbolized the rays of the sun, guiding the soul upward. Temples were built as models of the cosmos. The outer courts represented the earthly world, while the innermost sanctuaries mirrored the primeval mound of creation. Every column, every alignment with the stars, was intentional. Even shadows and light were part of the design, marking solstices and equinoxes. Festivals and rituals were filled with symbolic acts. During the Feast of the Valley, Egyptians carried statues of the gods across the Nile, symbolizing the union of the living and the dead. In funerary rites, the opening of the mouth ceremony restored senses to the deceased, symbolically allowing them to eat, speak, and breathe in the afterlife. Even everyday amulets worn by farmers or children were miniature temples of meaning, believed to channel divine protection. For the Egyptians, these symbols were not metaphorical in the way we might think today. They were realities in themselves. To place an ankh in a tomb was not simply a sign of life, it was a gift of life. To paint Osiris green was not artistic license. It was to imbue him with the essence of renewal. In their worldview, the symbol and the thing it represented were inseparable. This symbolic universe is part of what makes Egypt's legacy so enduring. Even today, people wear the ankh as jewelry, display scarabs as good luck charms, and marvel at the mysterious gaze of the Eye of Horus. The forbidden history lies in this very continuity, that across thousands of years, symbols created in a desert land still speak to us, carrying echoes of meanings we only partly understand. Though the pharaoh's reign ended more than 2 millennia ago, the echoes of their myths still shape our world. The gods and symbols of ancient Egypt may no longer be worshipped in temples, yet they survive in language, in religion, in art, and in the imagination of popular culture. Egypt became not only a chapter of history, but a sourcebook of enduring archetypes. Take the image of Isis, the devoted mother and powerful magician. In Roman times, her cult spread across the Mediterranean, reaching as far as Britain. Temples to Isis stood in Rome itself, and her worshippers celebrated rituals of mourning and renewal that strongly influenced later traditions. Some scholars see her as a precursor to the Virgin Mary, another mother figure who embodies compassion, protection, and miracle-working power. The story of Osiris, resurrected after death, also found echoes in other faiths. The idea of a god who dies and rises again appears in Greek mysteries, in Persian traditions, and later in Christianity. Though each tradition is unique, the pattern of sacrifice, death, and rebirth is one of humanity's most persistent myths, and Egypt gave one of its earliest and most vivid forms. Even the concept of Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance, left traces in philosophy. Greek thinkers who studied in Egypt, such as Pythagoras and Plato, carried back ideas of harmony, proportion, and cosmic order. These influenced the foundations of Western philosophy and science. The idea that justice must be measured, weighed, and balanced echoes the Egyptian vision of Ma'at's feather and the judgment of souls. In language and symbolism, the impact is everywhere. The ankh, once a hieroglyph meaning life, is now worn worldwide as jewelry. The Eye of Horus appears as a protective charm, painted on ships, tattoos, and even digital icons. The scarab beetle, once placed in tombs as a symbol of rebirth, now decorates souvenirs and logos. Even when stripped of their original context, these images carry a sense of mystery that continues to fascinate. In modern popular culture, Egypt is a constant presence. Movies like The Mummy and Stargate imagine lost tombs and hidden powers. Video games such as Assassin's Creed Origins recreate ancient landscapes and allow players to walk the streets of Alexandria or climb the pyramids. Novels weave Egyptian gods into fantasy worlds, while countless documentaries revisit the riddles of the pyramids and Sphinx. Egypt's myths have become a shared language of adventure, danger, and wonder. Even festivals bear faint echoes of the Nile. The idea of resurrection in springtime, celebrated in Easter, parallels Osiris's rebirth and the renewal of crops. Harvest rituals across the Mediterranean borrowed imagery of fertility and death from Egyptian cycles. In modern astrology, zodiac signs and planetary lore carry traces of Egyptian stargazing, though filtered through Greece and Rome. There are subtler echoes, too. The fascination with secret societies, from alchemists to Freemasons, often draws on Egyptian imagery. Obelisks stand in capitals around the world, from Washington to Paris, symbols transplanted from Luxor and Karnak. Museums house mummies and sarcophagi that still draw crowds, their silent presence suggesting that the ancient world still whispers to us. What makes these echoes powerful is not just their survival, but their adaptability. Egypt has been reimagined again and again, as a land of magic in medieval times, as a cradle of wisdom during the Renaissance, as a playground of adventure in Victorian novels, and as a digital landscape today. Each age has projected its own desires onto Egypt, yet the core myths remain recognizable. This persistence is part of the forbidden history. It shows that Egypt's legacy was not buried with the last pharaoh. Instead, it spread, transformed, and embedded itself in cultures far from the Nile. The gods, the symbols, the stories, they became archetypes, carried forward in different guises. To study them is not only to look back, but to see the hidden roots of our own imagination. For centuries, Egypt was known only through stories. Travelers told of golden tombs, colossal statues, and curses that struck grave robbers. But in the last 200 years, archaeology has sought to replace legend with fact. Yet even as scholars dig, measure, and translate, mysteries remain, questions that science has not fully answered, leaving space for the forbidden history to endure. The turning point came in 1799, when French soldiers uncovered the Rosetta Stone. With its trilingual inscription, Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphic, it offered the key to unlocking Egypt's written language. Jean-François Champollion's decipherment in 1822 opened a floodgate. Suddenly, the carved walls of temples spoke, revealing hymns, decrees, and daily records. Egypt was no longer a silent enigma. Yet even with texts in hand, puzzles multiplied. The construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, remains one of archaeology's greatest debates. How did workers cut and move stones weighing up to 80 tons? Ramps, sledges, and manpower are the usual explanations, but the scale and precision of the work still astonish engineers. The alignment of the pyramid with cardinal directions and certain stars raises further questions. Was it simply skill, or was astronomical knowledge more advanced than we think? The Sphinx poses similar riddles. Geological studies of its body suggest patterns of water erosion, leading some geologists to argue it may be far older than the conventional date of 2500 BCE. If true, it would imply either an earlier unknown culture or a dramatic change in climate far before recorded history. Egyptologists remain cautious, but the debate shows how evidence can point beyond accepted timelines. Medicine offers another field of surprise. Texts like the Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to around 1600 BCE, describe surgical procedures, diagnosis, and treatments that sound remarkably modern. They show an empirical approach, observation, prognosis, and treatment that predates Greek medicine by centuries. At the same time, magical spells and prayers accompanied remedies, showing that science and religion were inseparable. For the Egyptians, healing required both practical knowledge and divine protection. Astronomy was equally advanced. Temples such as Abu Simbel and Karnak are aligned with solstices and star risings. The ceiling of Denderah's temple preserves a zodiac, showing constellations and planetary cycles. While some claim this reveals hidden advanced technology, scholars note that careful observation over centuries could produce impressive accuracy. Still, the precision continues to inspire wonder. Anthropology adds another layer. Myths like the Osiris cycle may encode agricultural rhythms, death in the dry season, rebirth in the flood. Stories of Ra's nightly battle against Apophis may reflect the struggle of light against darkness, experienced daily in desert lands. The weighing of the heart in the afterlife may mirror the deep human need for justice. From this view, myths are not fanciful inventions, but poetic ways of understanding the human condition. Yet archaeology also uncovers the limits of our knowledge. The lost labyrinth of Hira, described by Herodotus as greater than the pyramids, has never been found in full. The tomb of Imhotep, architect and healer, remains missing. Countless sealed shafts and chambers still lie under desert sands, waiting. And questions about the sudden rise of Egyptian civilization, how writing, kingship, and monumental architecture appeared so quickly, remain unsolved. Some researchers argue that we must accept a mixture of perspectives. Myths may not be literal, but they carry truths. When Egyptians said the gods taught them agriculture, perhaps they meant that the discovery felt like a gift beyond human capacity. When they built pyramids aligned with stars, perhaps they sought to embody cosmic order, not just architectural perfection. Science can measure stones, but myth explains why people believed it was worth moving them. The dialogue between science and tradition is not a battle but a balance. Archaeology grounds us in evidence, while mythology reminds us of meaning. Together, they form a fuller picture. And in the spaces where evidence is silent, imagination continues to weave. That is why the forbidden history of Egypt endures, not as a secret conspiracy, but as a horizon of questions that no amount of digging has yet closed. Standing at the edge of Egypt's legacy, we are left with more questions than answers. The pyramids rise against the horizon, their edges worn but their presence unshaken. The Sphinx stares into eternity, its gaze unchanged by the passage of dynasties, empires, or modern visitors. Every stone, every carving, every fragment of myth speaks of a civilization that saw itself not as temporary, but as eternal. Why does Egypt continue to fascinate us? Perhaps because it is both known and unknowable. We have the Rosetta Stone, papyri, and thousands of excavated sites, yet the heart of Egypt resists full explanation. The myths of creation, death, and resurrection still pulse with mystery, as if the ancients left them deliberately incomplete. They challenge us to imagine, to interpret, and to wonder. Egypt reminds us that myth is not childish fantasy. It is a language of meaning. To the Egyptians, stories of Ra, Isis, or Osiris were not metaphors, but truths that held the world together. They gave purpose to the Nile's flood, dignity to the struggle against death, and shape to the eternal battle between order and chaos. Even if we no longer believe in the gods themselves, the patterns remain. Cycles of loss and renewal, struggles for justice, the hope of life after death. Science offers us tools, measurements, and explanations, but it cannot erase the resonance of myth. Instead, the two stand side by side. The precision of the pyramids amazes engineers, while the story of their builders inspires our imagination. The medical papyri show rational observation, while prayers to Thoth reveal faith in divine wisdom. To study Egypt is to see the human mind working on all levels at once, practical, symbolic, spiritual. This is the essence of the forbidden history. It is not a dark conspiracy locked in secret vaults. It is the recognition that Egypt's truths cannot be reduced to a single explanation. Some mysteries may never be solved. How precisely the stones were placed, why certain temples align with the stars, what lost texts once contained. But perhaps that is the point. Egypt teaches us that wonder itself is part of wisdom. In our modern world, we often demand certainty. We want clear answers, proven facts, and neat timelines. Egypt resists that. It whispers that knowledge can be layered, that truth can be both myth and fact, symbol and science. It invites us not to conquer its mysteries, but to live with them, to let them remind us that humanity is more than logic, that imagination is as vital as calculation. As the desert winds move across the ruins, we hear echoes of voices long gone, priests chanting in temples, workers hauling stones, mothers telling children the stories of Isis and Horus. Their words drift across time, still carrying meaning. They remind us that civilizations rise and fall, but myths endure, shaping the way we see ourselves. So when we speak of the forbidden history of Egypt, we are really speaking of our own longing, for meaning, for continuity, for connection to something greater than ourselves. Egypt is a mirror, showing us both the heights of human achievement and the depths of our questions. Its monuments may be ancient, but its mystery is alive, calling us to wonder, to seek, and to never stop asking. And perhaps that is Egypt's greatest secret, not hidden chambers or lost scrolls, but the enduring ability to make us dream.